This is the KDA villain short. I'll post the link once again. It's a very atmospheric short, and like I said before, the animation is very minimalistic. There's really not too many big flashy scenes. Actually, it's a lot more visual effects and lighting demos than anything. But with that, the animation, because it's so minimalistic, really needs to stand out. It needs to pop whenever it comes in, and it has to have a lot of appeal to it. We can't let this animation just be boring, for lack of a better term. So, this is a challenge for animators. Now, for anyone who's curious, I didn't animate on this. I'm just analyzing this. But these types of animations are a challenge because you have very short clips. You don't have enough time to really sell an idea for a long time. The audience has to be able to read it quickly, and it has to be super appealing right off the bat. But it also doesn't really move that much. None of these clips have a character that's bouncing around the screen or doing huge pose changes. It's just small little things, or like what we're gonna see here, a really close up on just the lips. So how do they make that appealing? How do they make all of this look so cool? Now, we're not gonna look at the VFX stuff. That is really cool as well. Like, just all of this kind of visual motion is really, whoever planned all of this out, it's a technical animation nightmare and dream all at the same time. But let's actually focus on the animation. So we'll kind of pause it here. Well, actually, we're almost there. Let's play through the end for anyone who hasn't seen it, and then we can go through. Yeah, the VFX stuff is like just amazing. It's all cloth sim, and like, look at that. To have to animate that object, and then the rendering, like the translucency, there's going to be a scene coming up here where you get that depth of field and then like the cloth sim right there. So good. The caustics and the subsurface scattering, the fact that you can see through the object, it's just so spot on. The whole thing here is a masterpiece. I love the smoke effects too. Smoke has come so far in really capturing that billowiness. So let's see. Just catching up with the chat here. Yeah, anything with the close-ups on the face, they are very mesmerizing. Let's see. So, League of Legends villain short. So, let's take a look at some of the animation from here. Let's see. Am I allowed to say curse words in the chat or nah? Not typically, just because this is kind of for everyone. Not that I personally mind curse words, but because this stream is kind of all ages, I try to keep the chat PG. If something slips out, not the end of the world. We're animators. We're not, like, we don't wear suits and ties at work. We're not trying to be super professional all the time. But because there's a lot of kids who come in here to learn about animation, family friendly, or PG-13, around there. And him, Speedo, hello. So let's jump in here and look at our first clip. So the very first clip is this one right here. This is the animation that I want to look at first. And as we look at this, again, there's really not that much animation per se right there. It's a character standing there and then a little head turn. That's it. So how do we make that appealing? If you were given this shot, how do you approach this and try to make this visually appealing with the minimal amount of motion that you're allowed to do? Well, there's a few different things, and this is going to be something that we're going to be looking at throughout all of these shots here, because a lot of them apply the same thing. The first is going to be silhouette. So silhouette, for anyone who doesn't know, is the outline of the body. So that. They push the silhouette and push the contrast of the silhouette. They make everything read very clearly. So, for example, here, we can very easily see who this character is and how they're standing. It's not a closed off silhouette that's just kind of a lump on screen with a little hair. No, it's very clear who they are and what they are. On top of that, it's also very clear what their line of action is. So in terms of animation, line of action, contrapposto, all of that stuff, we can see that here. We can feel, even in the silhouette, that there's contrapposto in the pose. We can feel this slight line of action in the character. Their posing is top notch. So even though it's very still, it's still appealing. Now, the next thing that we're going to be paying attention to throughout most of these is negative space. So negative space, for anyone who doesn't know, is the space between the silhouette. So not just the character stuff, but the space between. All of these right here, this right there, that's all negative space. Even technically out here, this is all negative space. So all of this. Usually when we're talking about negative space, it's the stuff that's right next to the character. Now, as we're looking at this, pay attention how those negative spaces change over time. So, for example, here, if we look through this, watch that negative space, especially in the arms and the ribbons. We can feel them changing. It might not seem like much. It might kind of seem like, yeah, obviously negative space is going to change when things move. But it's actually something that most animators, when they're starting out, tend to forget about and not realize that it is part of animating a character. And it's actually very easy to fall into a habit of animating where your negative space doesn't change. And in this case, if that happened, it would be very boring. So, for example, let's say I put my hand up here, and you have this negative space. It's kind of a triangle right up there. And I'm animating this very still scene. It could be very easy for me to just keep that arm moving with the head. Even if my hand is kind of moving, it just moves with the head like this, and that negative space never really changes. It just stays the same. What this creates is a boring motion. Even though we might have a strong silhouette and everything else is working, that negative space is causing the entire thing to stay dead. Instead, I would want to contrast that. So maybe have my arm do something like this. Now that negative space is changing. If I compress my arm just a little bit more, we get that change there. We're starting to get this change in negative space. And that creates dynamic motion while keeping things simple. We're not having to move things a ton, but visually we feel that change. So throughout all of these, especially when we get into the hand motion, we're going to be really focusing on that negative space and how they're using that. So let's kind of take a look here. So they come through and watch that negative space. See how it changes? Especially on the arms there. How we start off with just a little tiny sliver there and there. Then here we kind of lose it on that side before they grow on either side. That is helping to sell it. You could have the exact same animation in the arms, where the arms kind of have this beautiful overlap, honestly. You can see how as she's shifting her weight over this way, we have the one arm kind of leading the action. You can almost say it's like the arm is hitting her hips put it a little bit more like if it was a little bit largely or more, if the animation was a little bit more bigger, I guess you could say, moving more. The arm is coming in, hitting her side, which pushes her hips over, which then pushes the other arm out. It's kind of like those office toys where you drop a sphere and it hits the other one and bounces back. That's kind of what she's doing right here. Her arm comes in, hips move, then the other arm moves. So doot, 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 like that. That's basically it. But if it was positioned in a way that that negative space wasn't clear, you could have the exact same animation, but especially from the distance, and because we're dealing with silhouette so much, you wouldn't read it. It wouldn't be appealing. So that is the first thing, negative space. And then we have the beautiful one in here. There you go. As those ribbons move, the thing that's making it feel so interesting is that negative space changing and flowing over time. Okay. Now, just on that ribbon, the other thing that they're trying to do is, or that I shouldn't say that they're trying to do, but that they are doing very successfully, is that the negative space doesn't loop. So if we look at these ribbons here, we get this big shape right here. As it goes through, the next time we see that same shape, it's down here, much smaller. Then over here, we get that same similar shape right here. So even in kind of this repeating ribbon, now this ribbon would most likely be done with FX, not with keyed animation. But even then, whoever is animating this is making sure that it doesn't just loop, doesn't cycle through. Okay. Now, just on the weight shift here, as the character shifts their weight, this is, again, a very subtle motion. Honestly, if you were animating this, you could easily just go, do it, done. Aha, weight shift, yay. It's not a big thing. But watch how they're doing it. They're leading with the hips. And for anyone who's been in these streams or my Q&As, my classes, you know, pick something to lead. It makes things much more interesting. Here, instead of just shifting over very straight, watch the actual line of the body. If we kind of look at the top of the head to the center of the hips there, as she goes here, you can feel the hips move first. And let's actually see if we can actually spot this. Yeah, so if you watch with that dot there, the top of the head doesn't move right there. It's technically moving a little bit, but it's more rotating as the body moves under it, and the hips are leading. Very slight. And then after the hips lead, then the body slides through and stands back up. At this point, the hips have stopped and the upper body is moving back into place. Very small weight shift, but it works and it's appealing because of this breakup of action. Even in silhouette, we also feel the shift of the hips. How I'm going to exaggerate this here. The hips at the beginning are a little bit flatter. As she shifts her weight, we feel that stronger angle right in there. And the program I'm using here is Keyframe Pro. There is a free version, Keyframe MP. There's the links. The Pro version is, I forget, $70 or something like that, but it's well worth it. So, yeah, it's a great review tool. The nice thing is you can even export all of these drawovers into Maya if you want to. It's very similar to SyncSketch. Honestly, if you want to use SyncSketch, you can. The benefit of this program is that SyncSketch has kind of an upload limit, so you're only allowed to upload certain file sizes. With this, I can open up a movie, an entire movie that I have on my computer, and scrub through the whole thing, which is really nice. So SyncSketch has a lot of really cool tools. This one's kind of better for bigger clips. And yes, I agree, the KDA animators are amazing. It's mind-blowing what they do. I love their videos. The whole like League of Legends animation team for all of their shorts are amazing. So we've got this clip here. Really great motion. I love the little swing at the end here on her arm right there. This is really, if you've done Animation Mentor, it's the pendulum assignment. Just have the arm swing and then pendulum to a stop right there. That's pretty much it. So a little swing right there. Now, let's go to this shot here. We've got a simple head turn. Whoop, that's it. Once again, as an animator, it's kind of, it's easy to animate something like this in the sense that it's not very long. You don't have to worry about shooting a ton of reference. It's what, only 223 to 250. So 27 frames. So just a little over a second. Like that's nothing. You could finish that whole animation in no time. But it doesn't mean that the animation has to be boring or dull or bland. We can make the animation interesting. Now, the way they do this here is mostly just the arc of the head. So instead of a head turn where the character is just rotating their head linearly flat, they're making sure that there's an arc. Now, normally it would be very hard to see that arc because the character is facing away from us. All of the facial details that we as humans tend to use, the facial landmarks, which is the eyes, the brows, nose, mouth, ears, all of that, those are what allow us to see arcs in the head, all of that kind of stuff. Well, we can't see any of it. All we see is this big ponytail. I'm assuming it's not even a ponytail, it's just hair. And as she turns her head, we can't see the visual details. The ear, we can kind of see an outline right there. We can't see the nose, and we only really get to see the facial features once she gets to this point right here. So they make sure to give her the glasses. And as she turns, those glasses are visually right there, right from the start. This allows us to feel that motion. If ever you have a character that's especially facing away from camera, try to give some visual landmark for the audience to look at. It doesn't have to be huge. If your character is not wearing glasses, it could be as simple as just turning their head so we could see the edge of an ear. Maybe turning the face so we can see the silhouette of the face, where we can see the orbit, the hole in the head where the eye goes, that dent right in there compared to the brow. Something that the audience can lock onto. If it's just the back of the head like this, it's going to be hard to get certain motions to read. It's not impossible, but much trickier. So they make sure those glasses are there right from the start. And even just the edge of the ear right here. Okay. So the character turns and we get this arc. We feel the head drop. And it doesn't just drop straight down. It's not just doing and then up at the end, just that. No, if you actually look, we're seeing this subtle motion. The glasses are starting to tilt down this way. But if you actually look at the head, and especially the minor details like the relationship between the glasses and the ear, right there to there, you'll notice that the head's actually tilting up slightly. So instead of just turning, she's actually tilting her head up, which would bring the glasses up, but then she's rotating her head this way, which brings that edge of the glasses down. Her head is tilting up while also tilting sideways. Ever so slightly. This is minor stuff. But that gives a little anticipation, a little upwards motion to the drop here. So the head's doing that and then down. As it comes back up, right here you can actually see it. Then if you watch the nose, you can kind of feel that upwards motion. They're overshooting. So it doesn't just come in and then lock. It goes down and then overshoots. Comes back up a little bit. Not only that, they're putting sympathetic motion into the body. This is huge, especially for a big head turn like this. as humans, our bodies don't really turn that much. Or let me put it, our bodies turn a lot. Our heads have a very limited range of motion. So, for example, if I turn my head this way, usually if you turn your head over, your chin does not go past your shoulders. It can reach just at the edge of the shoulders, if you keep your shoulders kind of relaxed. So you get there. After that, your body has to start twisting in order for that to happen, for the rest of the turn to keep going. So that's kind of if you really strain your neck. As humans, we don't want to strain ourselves. We don't want to push ourselves to a maximum rotation and then turn the rest of the body. No, if I'm going to turn my head, my body is going to start turning before my head reaches the maximum rotation. So I'll turn and then the body reacts. And that's sympathetic action. That is the body reacting to where the head goes. Oh shoot, I just looked at the chat. Lots of sips of water I have to take. You people are keeping me alive. And one more. Good thing I don't take a sip for every emote. I would drown. Thank you guys so much. For anyone who hasn't been in these streams before, I always forget to drink water. I've had 8-hour classes where I totally forgot to drink water. And that little emote is the only thing that keeps me from dehydrating. Apparently. I don't know why, I just forget. So okay, so sympathetic action. So as the head turns, not only will the body rotate, but if you notice, watch my shoulders. As I turn my head, see how the body turns backwards? It pulls away from the direction I'm turning. Now I'm kind of exaggerating it here, but even if I do it simply, the body wants to pull away in that direction. That's the typical natural thing to do when we're relaxed. Now, that's not always the case. So for example, I could turn my head and lean forward. That makes it much more kind of aggressive. But we have all of that little sympathetic action in there. Now, as we look at this clip, we're focusing on the head turn most of the time. But if you actually look down to the body, look what's happening. As she turns, we feel those shoulders right here start to move. As they move, they also shift over to the side. The whole thing is shifting over. It could have very easily, for the animator animating this, they could have easily just gotten away with turning the head and then that's it. But they put in that sympathetic action. And it's very subtle. Honestly, when you're playing it at full speed, your eyes don't even really pick it up. You're looking at the face and the head, but it's in there. And it's overlaid on the body. So what I mean by that, or I should say it's offset from the body, using my terminology a little bit more clearly. It's offset so that the head starts to move first and then the body. And do you think they used any mocap data for this? No. I've had people confirm this for me, which was really awesome. There's no mocap data in any of the League of Legends shorts. This is all hand-keyed animation, which means that they are thinking through all of this stuff. There's no like, oh, the motion capture had it, so I'll just use that. They are doing all of this by hand. Now, are they looking at reference? Most likely. They're looking at a lot of reference to get all of these motions in there. But they are putting that detail in themselves. And this is, as an animator, one of the coolest things, at least to me, and also one of the most frustrating, is that when we're living our lives and acting, let's say, you don't have to think of everything. An actor on stage doesn't have to think about blinking. They don't have to think about how high are they going to move their eyebrow? How are they going to turn their head? How are they going to shift their shoulders a little bit? They just do it. They just move because they're living creatures that move and breathe and blink and swallow and all of that. With animation, we have to put all of that in ourselves. So not only are we, you could say, acting a shot. There's a debate on whether animators are actors. We kind of are in a way, but it's a whole different profession. It it overlaps in certain ways, but not many ways. So we have to think of the performance, but also we have to put in all the little ticks and things that make a character alive. Even, for example, here, the eyelash opening up right there. Just a little bit. And that's what really sets great animators apart, is that ability to put in those little details and make them appealing. For me, honestly, it's just really thinking of that sympathetic action. If one thing moves, other things are going to move. Now, when you start going into cartoony animation, things get a little different because we can stylize a little bit more. But when you're trying to get just dynamic animation, it is the sympathetic motions that are really going to help. And yes, I agree with that. I do agree we're more puppeteers than anything. I would say that animators are closer to like Jim Henson and like all of those puppeteers, those great puppeteers, because they have to do the performance, but they also have to think of all of these extra things. Where is the characters turning? They're looking at a screen trying to figure out where the character should be. How will the mouth match the dialogue with the limitations that they have? And they're turning this thing that is just a rig, a toy, a puppet, into something that is alive. So let's take a look at the next shot here. So we've got some really cool shots here. The shot that I wanted to look at right there, again, really quick. A lot of these shots here, I'm spending like half an hour on them, but they're just super short. This one here, 6:43 to 71, so that's 28 frames. Yeah, 28 frames. Yeah, 1 second. That's it. Once again, how do they make this look appealing? Well, silhouette, negative space. That's the first two things. We have this very clear silhouette here at the beginning. We see all the details. We can see the face, the nose, the mouth, the shoulders, everything standing out. They even really push the silhouette of the hair back here. That is great. Beautiful silhouette here. Next, as it goes through, on top of this really nice silhouette, they're pushing the change in the negative space. So, for example, we have this negative space right here between the chin and the shoulder. As it goes through, it gets lost. That allows us to visually see that head turn and tilt and the shoulder coming up. They could have easily done this, depending on the camera angle and how they move the shoulder, same motion, but they could have kept a little bit of negative space there. If they did, or especially if it didn't really change that much, it wouldn't have felt dynamic. Now that's kind of a, for lack of a better term, obvious one, where it's like, okay, if the head turns and the shoulder comes up, of course the negative space is going to change. But one that I really love is in the fingers, and how they're using the negative space and the silhouette to make this hand motion much more dynamic. So they've got this hand coming down. Beautiful fingers going down there. And if we look at the negative space, at first glance, it's not super dynamic, because typically what we're taught as animators is to look at the fingers right here. And what you want to do is avoid even fingers where everything is the same between each finger. You don't want that. You want to make it dynamic. So you have something like that, like that, like that, like that. So you try to pose out the fingers so that there's some sort of difference in the hand pose. I know one of the Blender animators, he's really good. He was actually an animation mentor one class ahead of me when I was a student. His favorite hand pose is this, which is a very appealing hand pose and very dynamic. It creates really visually interesting poses when you keep the two middle fingers together. So you watch that spacing there. So let's watch that spacing. If we kind of watch this here, you can see that there's a small space here, large space here, wider space there. So we're getting 3 different spacings. It's not, I want to do this. It's not small, large, small with the same size here and here. This is the smallest, largest, medium. There's 3 different shapes there that we're getting. Okay, great. As it comes down, it doesn't really change. Yes, the fingers are curling, but that relationship stays somewhat the same until the fingers close. So how is that appealing? If I just do this, okay, yes, it's a beautiful arc, but that doesn't make an appealing, or it's appealing, but it's not visually dynamic. It's just kind of, okay, arc, yay. So the way they make this appealing and so visually dynamic in this little motion is that they look at the thumb. Exactly, the 4 fingers overtake the thumb. That's what makes it interesting. You have this contrast in motion. Now, if we look at the thumb isn't going backwards. It's not like the thumb is going one way while the fingers go the other. The thumb is continually moving down, right here. Still moving down. But they bring the thumb out and they do this, where the thumb is dragging behind and the other fingers rotate around. And what this gives is this visual contrast. And it's changing the negative space as it's going down. Instead of just having this gap of fingers that stays the same, that thumb is breaking up the negative space, the silhouette, and creating this extra feeling of motion without actually adding more motion in there. It's just making sure it's visible. So it's really just breaking that down, and it makes this so much more interesting. And it's not like they're doing a complex motion. It's not like the hand's spinning and doing something like this. If you actually watch the palm of the hand or the knuckles right here, they're just kind of going down. But having that thumb drag behind changes all of it. So that makes a big difference. If you're trying to get your hands to look more dynamic, we have to pay attention to the fingers, but don't forget the thumb. And we can use the thumb to exaggerate these motions, make the fingers just visually pop a little bit more. So let's play this back at speed and pay attention to that silhouette, that negative space with the thumb right there. See how by keeping that thumb still, it makes the fingers just more, they stand out more in comparison. Instead of just doing this, we get this kind of twisting feeling. It's a very little thing, but it makes a huge difference. And then you get that nice contrast at the end there where all the fingers curl in. And I love how you can feel the fingers like pressing down on something right there as the knuckles come up right here. You can see that right there. That's just a nice little touch there. Let's see, just a bit of digging, and they only had one animator for this whole video. Oh, wow. That's cool. Hugo Garcia. I'm going to have to follow them on Twitter or something. I'm going to write that name down. That is cool. They did an amazing job. See. Did you see the platform Agora to new animators? Oh, I have seen it. I've talked to a few people who are working on the platform, and it's really cool. I definitely recommend checking it out. I think it's free. I can't remember, but it's basically a big community of content for animators. Yeah, it is free. Yeah, that's what I thought. So definitely, it's awesome. Check it out. It's just basically a repository of awesome videos and knowledge and rigs and everything. A great way to start learning animation, especially if you don't want to go to school or can't afford a school. Great place. So I would check it out. Yeah, exactly. Basically everything a new animator needs to get started. Exactly. So let's take a look here. Yeah, and you can pay for animation reviews. So here, I actually have the site open. So this is Agora. So it's just a bunch of resources. So there's Jean-Denis Haas. Most of you probably know him from YouTube. There's Sir Wade. Most of you probably know him. And it's really just this repository of podcasts, time-lapse films, animation challenges, all of this done. All of this right in one spot. So I highly recommend checking it out. So let's get back here or else I'll get totally distracted. So we get some more really awesome animation here. I love this shot. Once again, this is just contrasting motion. So you're animating one hand really close to camera, one hand further away, and just kind of offsetting those fingers. And that depth of field is really helping to sell that and make it not feel too overly complex. See, this may be off topic, but would you ever be able to do an animation analysis on Studio Ghibli films? Oh, definitely. I would love to do that. I love Ghibli films. I can't remember if I did one or not. I might not have. If anyone has a preference on which one I should do first, definitely let me know. I'm kind of partial to either Kiki's Delivery Service, Princess Mononoke, Howl's Moving Castle is really... They're all so good. There's so many. And there's Porco Rosso. Porco Rosso holds a special place in my heart for some reason. Yeah, they're all really good. Actually, yeah, I think I did Porco Rosso. That's the one I did. I did an analysis on the car chase in there, as well as some of the flights and the fight at the end, the boxing match. But yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So let's keep looking at here. So this is awesome. I love this. This is such a cool shot here. You've got this beautiful finger motion here. It's really dynamic. Once again, the way they're selling this, without having to repeat too much, they've got this nice finger motion. It's all offset. They're pushing the silhouette and the negative space. We feel those changes going through that whole time. Now, in order to keep the fingers from feeling like it's just like wiggling just weirdly, they're using the thumbs as a way to give us a stationary point. If you look at the thumbs aren't doing this. They're not bending and wiggling around. The thumbs are staying straight and the fingers are moving. This gives us a solid point right here and right here to focus on. It also creates a visual contrast. By limiting the animation on the thumb, you make the rest of the animation on the fingers stand out more, oddly enough. Otherwise, the animation on the fingers would just get lost into a blur of, not even a blur, just a bowl of spaghetti of motion. So we get that. Now, as the fingers are moving, we can start analyzing the actual motion of the fingers. And what I love to do here is just watch how they choose which fingers to move. So for example, here, let's just focus on the left hand for now. As it comes, or as it starts right here, the main thing that they're doing is that they are moving the index finger first and the middle finger. So these two fingers are countering each other. As that's happening, we also have the pinky finger, like they're also coming down. And it's moving in time with the index finger. So it kind of creates this link between them. Instead of having all three fingers moving at different random times, it's really a contrast between the pinky and the index, and then the middle finger countering it. They come down, and then as the pinky comes down, we feel that ring finger drop down. The index finger reverses. So now we have the index going up, this going up, these going down. They are not randomly just moving every finger. They are keeping them in a type of pattern. And it keeps these fingers from feeling like, once again, they're just randomly moving. Not only that, once they hit their lowest point, like right here, they hold a little bit. You can see right there, the fingers are just holding. The only thing that's moving now, I believe that's the index finger right here. Everything else holds before starting to move again. They're breaking that up. It's not just constant motion, it's hold and then another motion. Now, we have all that finger motion. That's really cool. But you've also got this weight shift of the character. This just shifting of the body. And it feels really dynamic. Now, if we look at this, it's doing something that I typically try to tell people to avoid, which is everything is moving at the same time. If we look at this right from frame 1, everything is moving screen right. The wrist is moving screen right, the head is moving screen right, this hand is moving screen right, the hands are moving screen right. Everything is moving screen right. There's no contrasting motion up until the elbow starts to move out here. Okay, why does it look good then? If there's no contrasting motion, basically it just creates the feeling that everything's robotic and stiff. The reason it looks good is that they are changing the negative space. So once again, negative space comes in really handy. If you've got a character that everything has to move in one direction, just change up that negative space. Have the hands start over here, and then you do something like this. Now, my hands are still kind of locked together, so you'd have a little bit more offset between even those. So if we look at this, we have this negative space right here, very thin, compared to this much larger negative space. And as it goes through, it shifts. Yeah, it creates kind of like a parallax effect. Exactly. It's what creates that really nice feel of depth. But we can do that within a character's body, within like their arms versus their head, or even the head versus their chest or shoulders. We can push that offset so that even though they're all moving in one direction, we get this change. And as it goes through, suddenly that change gets even bigger when they add in the contrast of the elbow sliding down through here. So what is parallax effect? Parallax effect is when things closer to you move faster than things in the distance. So you see this, let's say you're driving in your car. If you look down right next to you, or like at the road signs by right next to you, you get this kind of everything's passing really quick. But if you look way off in the distance, maybe at buildings or houses in the distance, they're just slowly moving through the distance. So you've got this house slowly going through, and then the telephone poles or the electrical poles or signs are going as the house is slowly moving. That's parallax. Things in the distance move at a different rate than things close up. So it creates this visual change in what we see. If you want a really extreme case of that, you look at the sun and the moon. The sun and the moon in the sky, as we're driving, they don't change position. It's not like the moon, as we are driving, is shifting across the sky. It stays there because it's so far away that no matter how far we drive, it doesn't really change the relationship between us and the moon. Not enough to visually see a change compared to a house, which is we drive right past and it's gone, and now it's behind us instead of in front of us. So that's basically it. And you see this in video games. It's what made things like the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis look so cool in comparison to the original Nintendo Entertainment System. The original NES didn't have parallax. Everything in the background and everything that you were playing on moved together. It was a flat stage and your character just ran through it. With the Super Nintendo, they were able to add parallax. So things in the background could move a little bit slower than things in the foreground. You had layers. It creates this really interesting effect and makes the games look more alive and dynamic, and there's depth to it. So yeah, Paper Mario had a really good parallax in there because they really played with that feeling of paper objects in kind of a real world environment, or what should kind of be a real world environment, and it worked really well. So in this case, this wouldn't be parallax because the arms are right next to the head. They might be slightly further forward here, not enough that we would see a huge parallax effect. This is just the way the character is animating, just the arms being offset from the head motion. So that makes it interesting. It's that change. And it's a little thing, but it really makes this shot interesting, because if we were to just look at the wrists, the head, and right here, all of these just continually move screen right the entire shot right here. If we were to look at the hand, especially right there, it's all moving screen right. Honestly, the only thing that's moving screen left is the elbow right there. That should look boring. The negative space is what makes it interesting. So let's play that again and pay attention to how that visually changes there. Right there. Not much, but it makes it feel alive. It makes it feel like there's just something there, and our eyes want to take it all in. Now, on top of that, they're also playing with the angle. So the head angle starts over here. As she goes over, it straightens out, and then we get this nice angle there, which works really well with the shoulder motion and the elbow motion. So this is where, once again, they're playing with the sympathetic action, the connected feeling of these different elements. As the elbow comes out, it's pulling the head. And imagine if someone was to pull the elbow here. If someone's pulling my elbow, it's going to drag me in that direction. So pull there, and everything drags from that point. That's what they're creating here, very subtly. The elbow comes out, and as it comes out, we feel the whole section here almost get dragged over. You can see it right there. That gets dragged, and that's what's tilting the head. The head isn't just tilting randomly, it's tied in with that elbow motion, which creates the feeling that the whole character, even though we're not visually really seeing a connection between the arms and the head, there's this gap right here, and then a gap right here, we feel that they're connected. So it's not just some random person in front of the character with their hands just here and like just moving their hands. If ever you've seen like comedians do this, where one comedian will put their hands through the other person's arms and then pretend to be their arms, and it creates that disconnected feeling where the hands don't move in conjunction with the body. They avoid that by making sure that as the elbow goes out, we feel that connection to the head. So really powerful there. Oh, I did even more digging, and it looks like Triz did hire Mocap Studio for the music video for this one here. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder which scenes they used mocap on, because definitely here, this wouldn't be mocap. This would all be keyframe animation. This is most definitely keyframe. That's way too exaggerated to be mocap. Oh, more, which was done by Axis, was fully keyframed. Okay. Now, one thing to keep in mind with mocap, just for anyone who is interested in learning about animation or is learning animation, when something is mocapped, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're using it for their actual final animation. they can be using a lot of mocap, a little mocap, or none at all, even though technically the studio is using mocap. Mocap is one of those really cool tools as animators where we can choose how much we want to use from it. So what I mean by that is, yeah, it can be just a base. So let me actually put in the levels. So when we're using mocap, we can either take the mocap and just clean it up. Basically, oh, and Human After All, thank you so much for the sub. Oh, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. I love how this song, especially when some of the other music plays, it's like this dark music, and then this happy Super Mario song comes in, and it's it always makes my day. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Yes, I want to animate it so bad. I want to animate that dance. That one and the Zelda dance. For anyone who doesn't know the Zelda dance, we're probably going to be covering that at some point. It's even better. Yeah, so mocap. The stage of mocap is we can take most of the data and just add a little cleanup. Honestly, you will almost never have mocap that you just take the mocap and then put it into the final product. It also almost always has a level of cleanup to it. Sometimes a little, sometimes a lot. So we clean up the mocap, put it in. Great. The next level that tends to happen is that we'll take the mocap data and we will use elements of it. So this depends on the animator. Some animators will use the mocap data and just save out their keyframes from it. It's like, imagine going into blocking where you put in all your keys. You're just taking your keys from the mocap data. You take all of those, delete the rest, and then reanimate the in-betweens. That way you can exaggerate it, but you're still getting that physicality of the mocap data, that realness of it. And you're still exaggerating those key poses as well. But it basically gets you blocking super quickly. Other animators will do a similar thing, but instead of looking for key poses, they're just going to save every 4 frames. So save the first frame and then go 4 frames forward, save that frame, go 4 frames forward, save that one, delete all the keys in between those, and then reanimate them. That way you once again have the physicality of mocap, but not the mocap feeling, that slightly too realistic feeling. The next stage of mocap is, you could just say it's super reference. So you have the mocap data and then you just hand animate everything, but you're using that mocap data as a way of using it as reference, where you can go around it all angles because it's saved onto the computer. You can just tumble around the whole reference and you're using it as reference. It is just super reference because you can just use it and look at it from any angle. So that is the kind of different levels, and of course there's in-betweens on all of that. Sometimes you'll use just a section of the reference or of the mocap, other times you'll use a large section. And will this be on the record? Yeah, so all of this is recorded. So if you want to catch up with this stream, all of these streams are recorded. You can find them if you click on the avatar down there and then go to the videos page. You can find a list of all of the previous streams and stuff. And usually I'll take all of the streams at some point and then cut them down into the individual demos, so you don't have to watch a 3-hour stream to catch one little section. Now I will say Twitch, it doesn't give the best organization tools on there, so I need to do a pass on organizing those videos. It really sucks right now. But once I have time. So yeah, a whole discussion there on mocap, but hopefully that's interesting. And like in this, for example, let's say, for example, they used mocap on here. Most people don't move their hips like this. This is a huge sideways motion there. Honestly, that would probably break the spine, especially considering how much the head is staying still. Look at that. I very doubt that you would get that in real life mocap. You would get something similar, but this is definitely exaggerated. Everyone, yeah, exactly. Everyone walks in the store like that with their head perfectly just locked in place. It makes it easier to follow our prey, the box of cereal on the aisle. So even if they used mocap, they are exaggerating it, which is fantastic. You want to stylize the animation to the project, not just go, oh, mocap, that's all I have. Now, whether it's keyframed or mocap, kind of both apply. Now, in this shot, the main thing I wanted to talk about was how even though we don't see the legs, we still feel the impact. And that is right there, like you said, the contrapposto is so pushed. It's fantastic. So contrapposto is the contrast between shoulders and hips, typically, but you can apply that to the face. You can apply it to all sorts of things. And in this case, we really get this big contrast right there. Look at that big hit. And what I really love is how we can feel that hit happening as she's walking. Again, without even looking at the legs, we can feel when the hip contacts the ground and then takes the weight. For anyone who's in class 1 right now at Animation Mentor, this is what you're going to be doing. You're doing your vanilla walks and your personality walks this week and next week. Pay attention to this in your own shots. You want to feel that weight shift happening. If your hips are just tilting, just kind of evenly the whole time, that's not a weight shift. That's just teetering. It's just doing this. When we walk, as we hit the ground, there's going to be some sort of knock in that motion. There's going to be something that offsets that motion. So for example, if I bring my hand down and it hits here, we get that hit right there. That little bit faster motion right in there. Same thing with our leg. Our leg reaches out for the ground, and as it hits the ground, there's a shock wave that goes through and goes into our hips. Now here, we can feel that. The hips are coming up right here. This is not the contact yet. You can see how it goes up, holds right here, right there. That's the contact. So you get the contact, which is probably right around here. And then whoop, the hips have this big, strong hit. We get a little bit of motion, then right through. And that shifts the weight. Usually the biggest shift is between the contact and the down pose, usually. Not every walk is a little different, but that's most of the time where you're going to see it. Now, as that happens, we get this big hit in the hips, right there. The shoulders are starting to react. Now, you could offset the shoulders a little bit more than this, honestly, but keep in mind that as the hips start to twist, the hips are attached to the shoulders by our spine, right here. The spine goes all the way from our tailbone, which is inside of our hips, it's within the hips, and goes all the way down to the base of the head. So neck all the way down is one thing. It's a spinal column. If the hips are getting this big twist, this big hit right in there, that's affecting the entire spine, which means that we're going to see those shoulders react pretty quickly. You can offset it a little bit so that the shoulders will move less than the hips, definitely, but you don't want to have too much of an offset where the hips change and the shoulders stay exactly the same. You can do it for a cartoony shot, but if you want more physically accurate, it's going to react a little sooner. So you get that. Now they're really exaggerating the chest rotation here, the torso. As it's going out, it really twists out to the side here, which just makes this whole silhouette even more dynamic right in there. And I love, this is not something that, as an animator, that you'll typically have to worry about. This is the cloth sim department, but I love the drag on the jacket here, where you get that drag there, and then you just get that little bit of a flutter out. It just feels so good, especially with that highlight right there. It just sells that motion, exaggerates that weight shift even more. And I love the arm motion here. How as the hips come through, the hips start to move right there. It hits the arm right there and throws the arm out. The hip motion is what's causing the arm to swing outwards right there. And it creates this really dynamic feeling where this arm doesn't really do much at all. It's just kind of hanging there. We get a little sympathetic motion as the shoulder moves, the arm gets dragged out. But the other one, because the hip shoots out, it affects the arm, creates this nice little extra swing in there. And you can see it here as well, where the hips come out, and then the arm has to swing out and around that hip. Okay, so let's take a look at all of that once again. Right there. It's not much. It's one step, but we feel it. I feel like the lighting artists of this entire video had a blast creating all these rim lights. Yes, they did an amazing job on this video. Every aspect of this video is just so cool. I love the way she raises her arms right here, right there. It's not a big motion, but I love how you can feel it, this contrasting motion where as she's lifting her arms, there's this little anticipation of the shoulders. They actually go down first. The arms are starting to come up, but the shoulders come down right here. So you can see it in this one especially. It goes down, even here, coming down as the arms start to raise up. Now this isn't so much the clavicles as the body, as a little bit of both, but that creates this really nice anticipation to this raise up here. And as it raises up, they're breaking up the motion. So the elbow comes up here, and then the elbow stops right about there. At that point, the elbow is kind of locked and is actually overshooting. It's coming back just a little bit. As that's happening, the lower arm is coming up, and then we get that nice little overlap here as everything comes down and the hand comes up. So here, everything is coming down. So it's just a little thing, but you get that nice extra life in that motion. It's not just arm raised up, locks in place. And we can still feel those contacts in those hips, nice and strong. Now here, this is something that I would probably assume if they're using mocap, they got from their mocap. Watch the ankles. They're not perfect. This is a detail I always love to try and put in my own shots, especially if a character is walking with like high heels and things like that. It's the imperfections of life. She's walking on rocky terrain. She's in high heels. High heels are not soft-soled shoes. So with soft-soled shoes like sneakers, things like that with a rubber sole, as we step, the rubber sole takes a lot of the impact and lets us kind of squish into the ground. Even our feet are technically soft-soled shoes. They are nice and squishy. These are solid-soled shoes, which means that as the character steps onto the ground, there's going to be these harsher motions in the ankle. So we get here, right there, this is our contact frame right here, where the foot hits the ground, and then you feel that twist in the ankle right here, that motion, as the foot has to change angle for the shoe to flatten down on the ground. So we get that nice solid motion there. And then it overshoots. It goes too far and has to come back. And we get that shake in the ankle. Same thing here. You can feel it right in there. If you watch this point right there, it shakes as it steps. It's not a big detail, but it makes it feel like the character is actually walking in high heels on rocky terrain versus just taking a step and then being locked on the ground. That is a great little touch. And this is either, again, from mocap, or I would say probably more likely just looking at reference of people walking in high heels and really paying attention to it. Those little details really help sell an animation and make it feel real. Now, another thing I love about this, and this is more kind of just the layout of the scene, is a shot like this could be very tricky to deal with in terms of foot contacts, because you've got a rocky ground, you've got these high heels that have to contact and really get like into the ground, you've got dirt that would have to be compressed, all of this stuff. But if you actually watch the way they composite the image, or compose the image I should say, you never actually see the contacts. It's cut right just a little bit above that, which basically means that as an animator, we don't have to worry about getting the perfect rotation and the perfect pivot point. It's just what looks good. As the FX department, you don't have to worry about making dust and imprints on the ground, all of that. It's, yeah, exactly. It's, yeah, just move that up and no budget. It's like, it's easy. Does it take away from the shot? Not at all. So when you're animating your shots, especially as you go into the more advanced classes, this is not something you would want to do in your body mechanics classes, because you're learning how to do the body mechanics, so you want to show it. But later on, if you have to have a character contacting the ground like this, you can always push your composition to make certain things easier for yourself. As long as you're not losing the goal of the shot, and you're not losing an aspect of the shot, it's okay to hide certain details. It makes it easier. Especially if you're a student and you don't have a budget for creating VFX and like a character walking through snow and you have to have the character actually interact with the snow. Just cut it up a little higher and there you go. If anything, you just add some puffs of snow getting kicked up and that's it. So, let's keep going here. There was another shot here that I wanted to look at. I think it was this one. So this, I just really love the motion of it. It's so fluid. Great motion. Once again, a lot of it is negative space. Really exaggerating that negative space. I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but honestly, that's what they're doing. So, pushing that negative space, pushing that silhouette, and pushing that breakup of motion. And once again, this is something that as I teach classes and as I watch student work, one of the big things that I tend to see is everything tends to move always at the same time and nothing really stops, which is, as an animator, you would assume our job is to move things. So things should be moving. And that's not always the case. More often, it's important to keep in mind that things don't move or will stop moving. Times that objects are still are just as important as when things are moving. So for example, a motion like this, as she goes through, I would see a lot of students, if they were doing a similar motion, as the arm comes up, the elbow would keep moving. That elbow here would just keep shifting through as the hand is doing all of its stuff. It's always wiggling and moving and doing something to keep it alive. But if you actually watch this here, watch how the certain parts of the body feel like they're not going to freeze in place, but they become more still while others move faster. So for example, here, as we're going through, we can really feel that elbow going up here, the hand going up. We can feel the other elbow leading out here, but the head is staying still. It's actually countering the motion going back here. So even though the arms are moving, she's kind of doing this motion. Her head's coming back. That keeps the head still. As her head starts to move here, the elbow is slowing down and then stopping. It holds. It's still moving. It's not like things just freeze in place as if there's a pin in them, but it slows down as everything else goes through. And what that's doing is allowing our eyes as the audience to follow her head turn into the arm motion out here. It leaves our eye screen left as that elbow stays more still. Now, as it comes through, that elbow here doesn't really move anymore. It's just kind of in place, moving, hold. The big motions that we're seeing are in the hands, right here and right here, as well as the head tilt. So we have those motions going up, whereas the body, shoulders are coming down. We get that contrast in there, but they're holding that in place. And even here, most of the body at this point right here is stationary as the arms finish their motion. So things don't have to stay in constant motion all the time. It doesn't mean that they freeze and just lock in place and then everything just moves around it. You always have that sympathetic action, unless you're doing something really cartoony. But we can hold something, keep it more still. See, I really like how they really aren't showing the character off in a typical way. It's more parts of her. Exactly. You never see the whole character. And if you do, it's from far away and only in silhouette. It really just makes it more dynamic, more mysterious. Okay, so now, yeah, there you go. This is one of the parts I really want to talk about, the close-ups on the mouth. So stuff like this is all hand keyed. You cannot, well, you could get facial capture on this, but most likely a lot of it is going to be hand keyed and kind of pushed. You can get facial capture in there, but facial capture, especially when you're going into really fine details like this close on the lips, can start to feel a little weird. So even if it was facial captured, there would be some major cleanup going on in here to really push the arcs and all of that. Now, what I really love about this is how much they are pushing the connection of the face. So as you're animating close-ups on the facial features, this is where you really want to pay attention to the little details. So shoot reference, if you're going to do this yourself without mocap, just shoot reference of your mouth really up close and look at those little details. And a lot of it is how things are connected. So for example, here, as the bottom lip starts to move down, the jaw is opening ever so slightly. We feel it here. The bottom lip is opening. And for just a little bit, we feel that connection of the top lip dragging down. It's pulling the whole mouth down first, because our bottom lips and top lips, if our mouth is closed, they kind of, they're slightly sticky. It's the same with our eyelids. So when we try to pull them apart, there's going to be a little bit of a connection in there. So as the bottom lip pulls down, it's going to affect the top lip. And then after that, we get the top lip reversing as we get into that word right there. Now, this is something I love. Look how sharp the bottom lip moves. Doot, 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 pop. Look at that. Ow. Our lips and our jaw, all of this can move very quickly. You don't have to have mouth shapes or eye shapes or facial shapes that are always super smooth. It's amazing how fast these muscles can twitch, which means that as we're animating the face, it's often better to go for sharper motions right in here. Imperfections, basically. So we get that nice strong hit. If we look at the mouth corner, it's coming down and there's just a little bit of an arc right in there. You can even feel it in this one. It goes in and then slightly out right there. And what I really love is right here, how you can feel that back corner squeezing in, which basically is the corners pinching right there. As we open our mouth isn't just top lip, bottom lip that just do this and flap around and just two separate lines. They can squish in the corners and we can get these really tight shapes where now it's just the center of the mouth that's moving instead of the whole corner. And when you're going into your ooh shapes, especially, you can really push that. And you can see that here, how we get that gap right there. That's right into the mouth corner here. Whereas here, the mouth corner is still there, but it's pinching. And what that gives you is that nice opening afterwards, that contrast in there. I see a lot of people when they do their ooh shapes, all they're doing is bring the corners in, and it does this. Ooh. That. That's not an ooh shape. This is the duck face or just the pinched cheeks. Like, ooh. No. Ooh. The corners do come in, but it also pinches. Ooh. Ooh. And it's the center of the mouth that's doing most of the work. Now here, we get this great arc right in there, just a little downwards motion there. And I love how you can feel the top lip actually move out and contrast. If you look at the cheek, you can feel the cheek coming down here as the top lip kind of stays in position right there, which is really cool. Now, a lot of this, again, it's either motion capture, so facial capture with cleanup, or the animator just really studied the close-up of the face, which it is possible to do. I've seen people do this kind of stuff hand-keyed, and it is fascinating. Now, I think there was another section right here. Yeah, right after this. So here, this is a very simple thing, but this is exactly what I was talking about before. Our lips tend to be a little bit sticky. And unless you open up your mouth very quickly and strongly, so my lips are all dry now, but if you kind of open up your mouth very quickly, you're not going to really feel it. But if you try to open up your mouth slowly, you'll tend to feel, unless your lips are really dry, a little bit of like stickiness in the corner where the middle parts first and then these part after. And they got that here. Look at that. You can feel that separation happening through there. Now, this is also in slow motion, so it would be snappier if you were playing this at, yeah, especially if you wear lipstick or if you have chapstick even, that can really just accentuate that. And in this case, she's definitely wearing lipstick here, unless she's got sparkles built in. So you want to get that. Yeah, it's exactly a zipper effect. That's exactly it. So a lot of rigs will have kind of the mouth pinch control. You can use that to create that zipper effect. Your eyelids will do the same thing. It's much more subtle. And usually you'll only animate something like that when the character is like waking up and their eyes are all crusty, and you really want to exaggerate that, like their eyes are just stuck closed. There's going to be a little peel motion in there. Normally blinks are so fast that we tend to avoid it and just kind of ignore it. But if you were to animate in slow motion, you definitely want to add that in. Okay, what other clips do we have here? I love that. It's so subtle. It's just the head tilting up. As the head tilts up, we get some contrast in the brows. Or sorry, not the brows, the lids. This is always a good thing to add in. If you tilt your head, look at the eyelids here. If I tilt my head up, eyelids come down. If I tilt my head down, eyelids go up. It's not so much that the eyelids are moving, but that they are staying in line with the eye. So if I'm looking at one point here, as I move my head, the eyelid is staying in line with the eye. So if she's going to tilt her head upwards, that's going to cause the eyelids and the eye to move down. What you don't want is the eyelids to stick with the head and the eye just rolls on its own. That's going to create a doll-like effect on your characters. Very subtle, but it's in there. Now, on top of that, they're adding in just this really nice, almost breath motion in the shoulders. If you actually look at the body here, it's hard to see because the flames kind of distract us. But you can kind of see it in this shoulder here. The shoulder actually comes, it's rotating screen left. It's going up, and then right here at the end, it comes down. And then the other one, it's doing the same thing, except it's going this way and down. So she's twisting ever so slightly, and we have a little, that kind of motion. To exaggerate it. Very slight. But it keeps the character alive. It's not just a rotation in the x-axis of the head, and then that's it. And then we even get some rotation in the chest. As she's doing this, her torso is rotating out this way, doing that. So it's tilting upwards ever so slightly. Tiny, tiny motion. Keeps the whole body alive, makes that nice sympathetic action. And then I just love the finger here, how it's just kind of tied to the chin. As she lifts her head, we get that little slip right there, and then this nice motion down. And you can see the biggest spacing is right there. It just drops in. Basically, if you're putting pressure here and then you let go, it's going to snap down and then ease at the bottom. It's not dropping slowly, slowly, slowly. It's getting that flick in there. Yes, I should drink. I even mentioned my lips were getting dry and I didn't even think of drinking water. I'll be a dried out raisin before I think, oh, maybe I should take a sip. Let's see. So, okay, here. This is the other area that I really wanted to look at. So in terms of lip sync, what I love about this is the teeth. When you're animating characters, it's very important to watch out how the teeth are positioned in the mouth and to make sure that we get appealing lip to teeth silhouettes and shapes. One of the big things that will make more appealing teeth posing is which set of teeth do you show. Well, we've talked about this on stream before when we talked about lip sync. But normally when people talk, you're going to see one set of teeth more than the other. So for example, as I'm talking, for the most part, you're probably seeing my bottom teeth a little bit more than my top teeth. As I talk, especially if I'm more relaxed, I tend to kind of talk like this, with my bottom teeth kind of on display. Some people talk like this. And usually when people are kind of happier or when they're smiling, you're going to see a lot of the top teeth more. You're not seeing the bottom teeth as much anymore, and you see just the top. Now, it doesn't mean that you're not going to see the bottom, but you favor that top teeth. Some people talk like this, where they're not even smiling, but you see those top teeth. So as you're animating characters, when you're animating, let's say you've got one rig, but you need to make it look like different characters, pay attention to that. You can make a character feel like a totally different person just by how they hold their lips against their teeth. Whether they're talking like this, or like this, or like that. Very rarely, though, do we want this, where a character's talking and they're doing this the whole time, where you see both sets of teeth. Not that people don't do that, but usually it creates the feeling that the character is a rig. It looks weird when it's on a CG character. So we favor the teeth. In here, if you watch the teeth, they very rarely show the bottom set of teeth. And if they do, you can see it right there. That's it. They're focusing on the top set. It creates a landmark for us to look at as the audience, and it doesn't distract us. If we could see the bottom set of teeth very clearly, it would drag our eyes down. Because we've got a scene here where everything's moving. The lips are moving. The skin is moving. The corner is moving. The lips are moving here. Those teeth act as a point of interest. We can focus on those. And even though we're not actually looking at the teeth themselves, it lets us, our eyes, it gives us an island to settle on. If we could see the bottom teeth, that would get in the way. It would highlight a little too much and draw our eyes down. Now, just another note here. You can actually see the tongue right there. The tongue is animated. Even though you can barely see it, they did animate the tongue. always animate the tongue. You never know. In a shot like this, even, where it's like, oh yeah, no one will ever see it. We're not even going to light inside the mouth. Nope, no one's going to worry about it. Animate it anyway, because you never know what's actually going to be seen in the final product. And it's much better to have it and not see it than to not have it and then oops, the audience can see it and it's not animated. So all that just on teeth. And this is actually, we can see a little bit of teeth here as well. So the next thing I really love about this is, again, the sharpness of motion. Look at the teeth here. We go from down here and in one frame, just snap shut. It holds for 2 frames and then pop, opens up and just holds there. Mouth shapes move quickly. We do not need to have slow motions where the mouth is even and just slowly changing shapes. No, you can go for quick, sharp motions in the mouth there. Now, with all of that, things are moving in arcs. If we look at the corner of the mouth, for example, right here, you can feel that corner of the mouth go up, around, keep going, and then it goes in here. They're not just reversing and zigzagging through the shot. There's these arcs that are being formed throughout. Now the lips also have arcs, motion. You can really feel that contrast between, like right here, the lips come in and then out, down and out, further out before pulling in tighter here. There's a lot of motion in there, a lot of forward motion. Never forget that when you're animating lips. Now, not only that, as all of this is happening, the motion of the lips are, I guess you could say, simplified. So what I mean by this is you'll notice that there's a lot of motion here. There's a lot of extra little bits and bobs, especially right here in the middle, where there's this kind of chattering little bit right there. Now, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, I believe. But when you're animating lips, one thing that can very easily happen is that you get into the chattering effect, or the chewing gum motion, where a character's talking and they're just doing this, da, 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 and they're just constantly, it feels like their mouth never stays still, and even though you're hitting all the beats, it just moves too fast. And part of that is, as we're animating the mouth, there's 2 things to keep in mind. Well, there's a lot of things to keep in mind, but 2 things in this particular case. One is that we do not speak and open and close our mouth on every single shape that we do. So it's not hello, I am Bo. Like, it's not 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't do that. It's he. It opens up he, l. So it goes he, l, o. Not he, l, o. He, o. So it's open, close, close. So we can build shapes and work them together. We're not constantly opening, closing, opening, closing. Now, the second thing which kind of built onto that is that instead of just opening, holding, closing, holding, opening, holding, closing, holding, we work in steps. So it goes open, little hold, open more, a little hold, close a little hold, close all the way a little hold. So we get these kind of little steps here. And within those, you can add little overshoots. So to kind of show it visually, instead of open, close, open, close, open, close, open, close, like that, we don't want that. No. We also don't want hold, 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 like that. That makes it look robotic. It's going to be much less chattery, but it's not going to be interesting. So we start to do stuff like this. So we get a motion, a hold, and then we continue, and then hold, and then we just work like this. And what that gives us is that kind of stair-step effect that you are hitting sounds, they make it clear, but you are exaggerating those motions. Now, the next thing you also want to do is make sure that the peaks and the valleys don't all line up. So for example, I drew this here. These are all kind of too close together, and so are these. Make sure that as you're going up and down that these change. Okay, so all of that. Okay, let's look at these lips here. If we look at the lips, it goes down right there. We get a little overshoot and then snap closed. We get down, up, and then as it comes down, or as it keeps going, we get right there, up, hold, up, hold, down. So we're getting that motion here, hold, motion up, instead of just up, down, up, down, up, down. It creates the feeling of complexity, but without that jitteriness and that like chatteriness in there. Now within there, you can even add a little overshoot. So something like that to make that motion just a little bit more dynamic and not freeze. Or you could even do something like that where the moving hold, but that will give you that life to the dialogue without getting the chatteriness. So just something to watch out for when you're studying lip sync. Now, yeah, so same here. Now we're seeing both sets of teeth. But if you watch here, again, they're favoring one set more than the other. Top teeth versus the silhouette of the bottom teeth. Look at how much larger that is. They're not even. It lets us focus on one set more than the other. And I love here how they reveal the fang. I know it's probably just a character design thing, but it's such a visual thing. They even made sure, like right here, you really feel that. It could have been hidden behind, so they could have had the teeth set up so that you see it right here, which wouldn't have shown as clearly. No, they made sure that that tooth is perfectly visible in silhouette there, which is really nice. And once again, you really feel those lips pushing into the teeth here versus right here where they come back out. And look at that. Look how much motion there is there. The whole mouth is dropping before coming back up. That is fantastic. And then the teeth look looks a bit less realistic. This is the weird thing with teeth is she's kind of in this kind of black light right now. Teeth are, when you're rendering them, they're similar to porcelain and porcelain and clay, like hardened clay, in the way they reflect light. I think they're also very similar to milk in the way the rendering works. Because of that specific look on teeth, and you'll see this if ever you look at people like in clubs and stuff with black lights and stuff, teeth look really weird when you see them under a black light. It's not just that they're white and they stand out, it's the enamel coating on teeth as well as our spit and saliva that makes them moist and wet. It creates this odd look that feels fake. And it's one of those tricky things where when you're rendering them, when you render them, sometimes teeth will look weird, even though that's technically how they should look. It's one of those just oddities of rendering. Now, I'm not saying that's the case here. It could be something's a little off, but more likely it's just the light itself is causing that effect. I love the specular right here. You can really feel that the shape of the lip right there. That's really nice. It's like rocks in your mouth. Yeah, it is bones in your mouth. It the human body is kind of weird because the teeth are exposed bone. That's what it is in a way. Enamel coated, but it is still bone, which is just weird. So let's take a look here. So same thing here as before. As she's walking, watch the ankles. So we get that step, great line of action right through the foot here as it steps over. And yes, this is all animated. A lot of it is hand keyed. There's a little motion capture, but this is all animated. So we get the ankle coming down here, and then you get that feeling of the ankle coming through, and we get this sharp bend in there. Right in here, same thing. Contact. I love again how they're pushing that line of action. They've got this nice curve in there, and then we get that contrast in there. And even afterwards, there's a little shake in there that they're adding in. It really helps to push that visual feeling that the foot is contacting the ground. This is something you see in real life. When we're animating, you have to put that in there, or else it'll feel like the feet just kind of glue onto the ground. So let's keep going here. Trying to think if there's any other scenes that I wanted to look at. Yeah, so for anyone who's new, this is all animated. I didn't animate this. This is done by, I forget the studio. It was mentioned earlier in the chat. But all of this was animated by one person, which was Hugo Garcia. Triz, that's it. This is the League of Legends short films. So we had done some analysis on the ones before in yesterday's stream, or was it yesterday's? No, 2 streams before that. And yeah, it's just amazing animation. Okay, yeah, so same thing here. Close up of the lips. Once again, feel that compression, that contrast right here, as not only are the lips coming in, but they are pushing inwards this way. The corners are pushing in like that, but you feel a little bit more roundness in the center. And then as it comes out, we get an arc like that. You see this type of arc happen everywhere in the face. Corners of the mouth, even the inside of the brow here. As you raise your brow, it's not just straight up and down. It tends to arc in as you kind of go upwards. The center of the brow will pinch together and then separate out near the top. So having that little bit in there, that little kind of compression and then circle outwards in the lips really adds to that moment there. Right there. Now, on top of that, even though this is a really close-up of the face, you can feel the sympathetic action of the face. So what I mean by this is, look at the shadow of the nose. Now, when we speak, our nose does move. So as you're talking, the tip of your nose is going to kind of bounce up and down. And if you do this side to side, you can really feel the nose moving if you kind of put your finger there. So our nose moves with our mouth, but the base of the nose down here doesn't move that much. It's a little bit more tight. It will move a little bit. Now, if we look at the shadow, as the mouth comes up, we can feel the head tilt right through there. Even though we're so close, we can still feel the tilt of the head. The mouth comes up, and the head is kind of anticipating down before moving up. And then as the mouth starts to come down here, the mouth leads down there. We're still getting that upwards motion, that contrast, before the mouth then drags the rest of the face down right there. So we're getting a little anticipation and drag back down of the face and the whole head. It's helping to accentuate that mouth motion. They could have easily animated this and just kept the head perfectly still and just moved the mouth, and that would have looked pretty good. Like, with all the detail they're putting in, it would have looked fantastic. But by adding that extra little sympathetic motion to the angle of the head and how it relates to the mouth, and especially the bottom jaw opening, it just adds so much more. Even here, like you can feel how the jaw is leading. If we look at the chin right there, look at how fast it drops compared to the lip right here. That jaw is leading and then the lip separates and then it goes. So they are breaking up that action. So yeah, that's pretty much it. We actually made decent time. It only took 2 hours to get through all of that. That's not bad. Usually the analyses take a little longer. To be fair, there's a lot of visual effects and just kind of more FX style animations in this, so it takes a little less time. So with that, let's see. Does anyone have any questions on any of the stuff we talked about here before we move on? Kind of just as a recap, the big things to watch out for when you're doing this kind of simplified animation, or with very, and by simplified I don't mean that, oh yeah, it's easy to do. No, it's you're focusing on one small thing, like just a hand, and it's not big motions, it's not like big twists, it's just a little turn or a little shrug in the shoulders, a change in the pose. The big things that will help make that really appealing: silhouette, so make sure you have really strong posing so that it's interesting to look at, and then your negative space, the space between the posing, so right here. If you look at that as you focus on your animations, it's going to help exaggerate those small changes and make it feel more dynamic very quickly. So that's the big things to watch for. And have I done any Overwatch analysis? I think I might have. I feel like I did. I might have just... Yeah, I think we did. I know we did the Hearthstone shot. I think we did a World of Warcraft one. I think I did a Blizzard one as well. But I'm always happy to do more analysis. I love looking at shots, and whether it's CG, whether it's a film or a movie or 2D, whatever, I love looking at stuff like this and just kind of trying to figure out, why does it look so good? Why is it so appealing? So if anyone has suggestions on things for me to look at, definitely let me know. I can't promise that I'll get to it. It all depends on my schedule, but I love doing this kind of stuff. Oh, Beyond Good and Evil 2, that was a good one. That was a really good one. Now, Blaze, yesterday when you were looking at my shot, you mentioned make the core correct. I didn't quite understand. Can you explain more? So basically, when I mentioned make the core correct, it's taking a look at the hips. That's the core of your character. So if we, let's see, if you look at a character, most motion is driven by the hips. So that is your core right there, the center of the character. If we can make that feel really good, everything else tends to feel much better afterwards and can be refined from there. So you want to make sure that the hips of your character look good. So the way I typically do this is I just constrain a sphere or an object to those hips and just focus on that. That way you don't see the rest of it. And you just want to make sure that it moves physically correct, like I was talking about yesterday. So make sure that as it's moving, you're thinking of the bouncing ball, think of the physics, how if something's in the air and not contacting the ground, it can't change direction. You want your ease ins and ease outs to work correctly, and you just want that simple core, that object, to feel interesting and look appealing with nothing else. If that happens, you're going to have everything else will look better. It doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect yet, but it's going to have that solid base to work on. It's making sure your foundation is good before you build the rest of the building, basically. If you have a weak foundation, no matter what great stuff you put on top, it could collapse and not work. Let's see. As this analysis was happening, KDA posted a new animation for this character. Oh, nice. I'm gonna have to check that out. Their animations are so good. Evelyn being well, Evelyn. I don't even play League of Legends. I've played it a little bit a long time ago when I used to have free time. I miss those days. I really liked it. It was a lot of fun, especially if you could get a good group of people. It's it's a fun game, and the animations are fantastic, even in game. Uh, they are really cool. I used to play Overwatch a lot. That had some really good animations as well, especially the reload animations. Do I play games? I love playing games. I just don't have time to play games typically. Ooh, let's take a look at this animation here. Nice. That. I don't think I can frame through this, so I don't have music or the audio playing. I'm not sure if there's music in it or not. That would cause issues. Nice. That's a nice little head move right there at the end. Now, this is actually something I tend to mention to students a lot. So when students are first starting to animate dialogue shots, something like this, one thing to watch out for is how you're animating the hands. Usually, when students first start animating hands, they're going to fall into two categories, or one of two categories. The first is that they don't move the hands at all. So the character is acting their shot and the hands are just doing this the whole time. That's not good. We move our hands, we gesture with our hands. We're constantly moving and reposing our hands. So you don't, if you're blocking out your shot and you're not posing out your hands, technically you're not properly blocking out your shot fully. There are times when that's good to leave the hands alone so that you can do something better later. But in general, you want to at least get a rough hand pose. The second category that I tend to see students fall into is that they move the hands too much. The characters are constantly doing this all the time, just wiggling their fingers around. That's not how we move. When we move our hands, there's very specific ways that we do it. And it depends on if we're hitting a pose and we're being active or we're being relaxed. So if I'm hitting a pose, we'll usually hit a pose and we'll stay in there. So for example, if I'm gesturing, I'll hit a pose, I'll stay in there, and then I'll hit another pose and I'll stay in there. And you can see here, that's what they're doing. She'll gesture and she might have a motion like this with her fingers, but then they hold. It doesn't mean that they're holding perfectly still. You can get some little overlap and some overshoots in there, but they are not just constantly wiggling. The other thing to keep in mind is when your hand is relaxed, your fingers will move in a very specific way, and it's based on the tendons in your hands. So your fingers, for anyone who doesn't know hand anatomy, your fingers are controlled by tendons that run from the tips all the way down the front, right here, and on the back, there. You can see it right in there. The tendons moving. Those are the tendons controlling your fingers, right in there. So, as you're moving your fingers, it's a puppet game. The muscles that move the fingers are actually down here. You can see it, like, if I do this, let's go full screen here. If I do this, you can actually see the muscles moving ever so slightly down here. Those are the muscles kind of affecting the fingers. There's no muscles in the fingers. We can't move our fingers with the muscle here. It's all tendons. Okay, how does that help us? Well, the tendons run down the front and the back of the hand, which means that if we tilt our hand, let's just relax our hand, and if I tilt my hand this way, forward, the tendons along the back of the hand are now being stretched because they're going around a corner. They're being bent here. Whereas these ones are relaxed because they're compressed. They're just there. Now what that means is that these tendons are pulling, which straightens your fingers. If you go the other way, these tendons are now under tension. They're going around the corner. These ones are relaxed because, well, there's this squish right there. That means these tendons pull, which curls your fingers in. So when you're relaxed, it really just depends on the angle of your hand, of your wrist. your fingers aren't going to straighten out this way unless you actively push them to be that way. So if you have a character that's collapsed on the ground and you open up the fingers this way, as if, oh, they're going to drag down, no, that's going to make it feel like they're pushing against something. They should be curled in here. They're not going to overlap downwards. Same thing here. The fingers are not going to curl down. They're going to stay a little straighter. There's still going to be gravity that pulls them down a little bit, but they're not going to be like this. So you have to pay very close attention to how you pose out those hands depending on the wrist positions. And this, you can actually try this out yourself where if you put your hand forward, see how far back you can bring your fingers. You can actually, a lot of people can bring their fingers quite a ways back, so you get that reversal there. Now if you go this way, try to do that. You'll notice that my fingers, it's much harder to put your hand back and then straighten your fingers. Those tendons down here are fighting it. You're trying to straighten these ones, but these ones are fighting you. Now same thing, oops, don't want to knock my pen on the floor. Do a fist. If you do a fist, try to really close your hand. If you have long nails, be careful of this. But close your hand and then go, let's say go forward here. If you go forward, it's going to be hard to close your hand completely. You go back like this, you can really dig those nails into the palm. But when you go forward, it makes it much harder to really dig those fingernails into your palm. Again, be careful if you have long nails. But a fist like this is going to be much weaker than a fist like this. It's why when you see people who get really angry, even though they try to like bring their hands in, like normally when we get angry, everything comes in and curls in. But when you do a fist, the tendons on your hands are going to be fighting each other because they're under tension. So it's going to be harder to do that. And it's why we don't see this. The tendons on the front of the hand, if I'm angry and I do that, my hand automatically wants to curl in. So just be careful how that works.